Mushrooms are a surprisingly versatile ingredient, and their culinary possibilities are endless, says Sunday Times food editor Hilary Biller.
Hilary, I absolutely love mushrooms. I have them in my pasta and my salad and anything else you can imagine. But dried mushrooms, now that's new to me. What's the difference between them and the fresh ones?
There's not very much difference between the fresh and the dry, except as you'll see, the dry is literally dried. Mushrooms are full of moisture, and what happens on drying is they go almost like paper thin and lacking in any moisture. Just take a feel of these mushrooms. They must be crispy and dry. That way they will keep for much longer. When the mushrooms are dried, the flavor is completely intensified. So they add a definite richness to dishes. But before you use them, you have to rehydrate them by immersing them in some boiling water.
You spoke about flavor. What's the difference in taste between these two types of mushrooms?
Well, dried mushrooms have the intense flavor, and that's why people dry them and use them. People describe it as the umami flavor, which tastes a bit like marmite, that sort of intense saltiness, yeastiness, rich in vitamin B. Porcini mushrooms have become very trendy. They're Italian mushrooms that are found in the forest, and you'll find lovely packets of them ready dried. But it's not something you could go off and do on your own and pick mushrooms. It really is quite dangerous unless you know what you're doing. They can be very toxic.
Drying mushrooms yourself is easy. Simply slice them and place on a piece of grease-proof paper on a baking tray. Pop it in an oven preheated to 150 degrees Celsius, keeping the oven door slightly ajar so the moisture can evaporate. It will take about 1 to 2 hours, and it's a good idea to turn the mushrooms often. If you're feeling more creative, Hilary demonstrates another alternative.
What I've got here is some cotton, which I've put on a needle, and it's a lovely sort of decorative thing to have in your kitchen, and it's a dual purpose because you're drying them at the same time. I've taken the stalk off because it's easier to get the mushroom onto the needle. Place your needle through the mushroom and you keep going. What you can do with the mushrooms is intersperse them with peels of naartjie or orange, and that will give them lovely flavor and also dry out beautifully, and you can use both in your cooking.
Wow, sewing in the kitchen, who would have thought? Hilary, do you have a few tips for us in terms of prepping mushrooms?
The first thing that most people, where they go wrong, is that actually mushrooms don't need to be washed. They're like sponges, so they will take up all that moisture and then lose all that valuable flavor that they have. So really what they need is you just take a piece of paper towel, brush them off, or a little brush off all the peat that's on the mushroom, and then it's ready to use. And another thing is, in cooking mushrooms, you never season them as they're cooking because that leaches out more of that lovely flavor. And it's always a good idea when frying them to let the moisture cook away. That intensifies the flavor.
Well, with all those wonderful tips, we surely have to put them into practice. Shall we get into the kitchen?
Oh, absolutely. Steak and porcini mushrooms, how does that sound?
Get out of that cooking rut and start experimenting with this earthy ingredient, and stay tuned for Hilary's recipe.
By supporting the Hoedspruit Endangered Species Centre, that's where we found goodness. Pick n Pay, always there for you.
Mushrooms are versatile and delicious. Sunday Times food editor Hilary Biller shares her steak porcini recipe.
Very simple ingredients. The dried porcini mushrooms, which have that intense flavor that we spoke about earlier. Some olive oil, salt and pepper. It's that simple. But steak without potatoes, no way, no how. But I'm not doing chips. I'm going to do some parmesan potatoes. The first step is my favorite part. And you need to develop a bit of muscle power for this. And if you've had a really bad week, this is where you have some great fun.
Boil the potatoes until just tender, and use a meat mallet or rolling pin to give each one a good bash.
This is a really good way to vent, and I feel like venting.
Oh, good.
It's been a long week. So just like that.
Yeah, just like that. Yeah, that's great. You're much gentler than I am. You'll have to do that the next 3.
Hilary is right. This is great fun, but don't overdo it, Mpho.
Well, we're not looking for mashed potato.
Oh.
You really developed those muscles. We just want them slightly smashed.
Okay.
But you've obviously had a bad week. Right. And now comes the good part. where you sprinkle each potato generously with some Parmesan, if you do that.
When it comes to cheese, Hilary believes one needs to be generous. An alternative to Parmesan is pecorino.
And then some salt and pepper.
Give you the salt and I'll just
Let's go around.
Finally, drizzle each potato with olive oil and place in an oven preheated to 190 degrees Celsius.
And now to the best part, the steak. This is something that's completely different, where you coat the steak in porcini mushroom powder, which gives it that lovely umami flavor. Then you need a very strong blender. All you do is you pop the porcini mushrooms into the blender. This is really powerful, so it works very well.
A guideline is to use 25 grams dried porcini mushrooms for every 2 steaks. Remember to find the complete recipe on Expresso's website, www.expressoshow.com.
Oh, the perfect consistency. You want a really fine powder. Dip it into a bowl. You can see that. It's almost like white pepper. And now to those steaks. These are glorious, sort of 2 to 3 centimeters thick, which makes them even better.
Hilary cuts slits in the steak to prevent it curling during cooking and to help release extra fat.
Just threw the steak a little into the meat and then rub it with some olive oil, because you want something for the porcini to really stick onto so it doesn't fall off.
Remember to rub both sides of the steak and use the best quality olive oil you can find.
And now to the porcini powder. Just sprinkle it over.
It really does look like ground pepper.
It does. Just rub that into the meat. You can see it sort of goes into the meat. It almost changes color. Turn over the meat and do it on the other side.
If you're not in a hurry, let it rest for 30 minutes before cooking in a preheated griddle pan, 3 to 5 minutes on each side. And don't forget the potatoes in the oven.
I think those potatoes could be ready. I can smell the lovely sense of baking Parmesan.
Let's take them out.
Oh, they look wonderful. Golden brown. See how the cheese is melted?
Look wonderful and smell great as well.
A tip is not to turn the meat too often. Also let it rest a few minutes before serving.
You can see how the porcini has given the steak a sort of brown crust, which will make it extra nice. Another 3 to 5 minutes on that side, and then it's done. Well, the steak has rested for 5 minutes. I can't wait any longer. Onto a hot plate, and then a couple of potatoes.
Potatoes look lovely.
And then I think just a sprinkling of those sprouts over the meat.
Dash of color.
We'll just finish it off.
Let's see it again. Bash a boiled potato with a meat mullet, sprinkle with Parmesan and olive oil, and place in a preheated oven until golden brown. Blend dried mushrooms into a powder, rub it into the steak with a little olive oil, and grill in a smoking hot pan. Yummy!
Wow, Hilary, I never knew how versatile mushrooms can be and that they can be put on steak in such a creative way.
And it tastes just as good.
To get this really amazing recipe, SMS the word steak, S-T-E-A-K, to 33728.
And it will be in the newspaper, the Sunday Times Food Weekly, this Sunday.
We found goodness in goed gedacht olive oil and all the good they do for the community. Pick and Pay, always there for you.